Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Climbing Sycamores podcast, where we look at today's topics to get a better view of Christianity. I'm Annie Beege, and I'm joined by my friends Ben Sadler and Matt Harbach.
Hello.
Welcome
back. Just a reminder that March 3rd is going to be our official relaunch, I guess, on a new platform. So you'll have to look up this podcast by its name, Climbing Sycamores. It will not be part of the Victory podcast anymore, starting on March 3rd.
Yeah, thank you for that reminder. I forgot.
I think that one of the reasons that we're trying to do that is, some people prefer listening to just the sermons, and then some people want to hear this, and then maybe people are going to be just searching for Victory sermons, and this is a very different conversation reaching a very different audience. So we want to make sure that was clear and clean, and so I'm excited about that.
Yeah, good. So I think today we're gonna just kind of talk about some TikToks that are.
Hold on,
yeah.
You guys made it through dry January.
Yes,
and. And then you made it through no
uncaffeinated.
Now, have you gone back to caffeine?
Just last Friday we did, yes.
But since then you haven't been buying Monsters,
or since then I've gotten a cold and I'm sick, so I went. I don't know. I'm suffering a weird kind of withdrawal, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
How about you? Are you back into old Annie or?
No, I mean not really. Like a little. But like last night I had a beer.
Okay.
But whatever.
Okay.
My new thing, my new kick is NyQuil before bed. Last 3 or 4 days.
They call that on the streets.
Goodness.
Oh. Yeah.
That doesn't give you a good night's rest. It just sedates you.
Yeah, and then you wake up like with a hangover.
Yeah.
I
do
feel up really groggy.
Yeah.
I wake up feeling really groggy.
You're actually not getting into like the deep sleep state.
I don't know. I go to sleep quicker, and I'm just trying to get as much sleep as possible to recover.
You're not your usual energetic self.
No. Barely recognizable.
Oh man! All right. So what are we talking about, Annie?
Yeah. So just looking at some of my favorite social media platform, TikTok.
Brought to you by China.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of people that are working to deconstruct Christianity, and we've done a podcast like this before where we kind of take some examples of TikTok users and content creators that talk about their deconstruction journey and why it's happening. But first, I kind of want to. This kind of parlays off of that. There's a content creator. He's a Korean Episcopalian priest. His name is Joseph.U, YOO is his username. And he's commenting on Sam Smith's recent performance at the Grammys. Sam Smith is a pop artist. I believe he's from the UK. And his latest hit is called Unholy. And so then the Grammy performance featured him and the gal that he performed the song with, and they're dressed in red, and we've got the horns and the fire, and there's red lighting and cage dancing, and it's really devil looking and what we would think that the devil would look like. And so this Korean Episcopalian content creator, he says, because there's been a lot of backlash about the Sam Smith performance. Is it devil worship? Is it a satanic ritual? And people are commenting, and he brings up the point. He says, well, what looks more like the devil? And do you guys want to just hear the TikTok that he...
Yeah, we'll play the TikTok.
Play the TikTok,
Yep.
Okay.
Tell me, what looks more like the devil? Sam Smith doing what he did on the Grammys? Or the pastor telling the abused wife, hey, I'm sorry he hit you, but you need to pray for him and you need to forgive him and you need to go back to him because divorce is not an option? Or telling church people, hey, instead of spending money on your treatment for your illness, why don't you give that money to the church and God will bless you tenfold? Or how about the SBC discovering that over 700 victims were abused over the past 20 years? Why do we continue to make mountains out of molehills while we completely ignore the actual mountains that are in front of us?
All right. Thank you. Well, my first reaction is is that the comparison that, like all those things that he said in there are awful. And I don't know why that would be the comparison. It's like somebody getting in a car driving drunk and say, well, why are we concerned about drunk drivers when there's people who are shooting people out there? Like, well, both are bad, and they both need to be addressed. I'm teaching a class on trauma right now, and for me, it's been probably almost a decade, 8 years or so, that I've been doing this work where worked with a man who's really kind of on the front lines of prosecuting offenders, and has done a ton of work in educating. And he's a Christian. He's a Wells Christian, and he's one of the top guys in that field. And he has taught me so much that after talking to survivors over the years, and after seeing how twisted perpetrators can be, every one of my sermons to this day, I put through a filter. Would this put unnecessary guilt on a victim? And would this make a perpetrator feel off the hook, like not call him accountable? So it's awful to see that, anywhere in any industry, and the Boy Scouts also had a big outcry of this. I mean, this is ubiquitous. I just heard a statistic that, the ACE score, and I shared this in the class, Adverse Childhood Experience Study, says that 1 out of 4 in the best neighborhoods, 1 out of 4 women have been sexually abused, 1 out of 6 men. And according to somebody who's at the class last night who's done a lot of work in this area and done a lot of studying, she thinks it's up to more like 80%. And there's because so many people don't disclose. And these, again, are in the best neighborhoods. Now you go into some other neighborhoods where there's not as much supervision or things like that, where things do get swept under the rug. So I don't know if it's necessarily a religious problem. It is a human problem. And unfortunately, religion has been used to hide it and to sweep it under the rug. But I only morality of having some sort of idea of the image of God, that humans deserve to be protected and humans deserve to be have rights from God. That's the only answer out. Yes, it's horrible. Yes, it's ubiquitous. Yes, it's been screwed up in all different ways, even inside of the church. But what is the way out? So bringing up those kinds of things, really awful what's happened now and disclosed in the Southern Baptist Convention. It sounds like they're taking some of the next steps to respond to that, all those victims. We usually think of the Catholic Church has been known for sweeping the rug, but they've come a long way also in responding to perpetrators and putting up classes and help safety training, things like that. So it just seems like a silly argument for me. I think
the reason that he's kind of using one against the other is that, first I'll start by saying that the song "Unholy" is about an adulterous relationship, and basically it's like, doing something unholy, stepping outside of the marriage and whatnot. And so I think the reason that he's drawing this kind of comparison or versus situation
is the outrage. Is that? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
okay.
Right. And it's coming particularly from people that are in churches, conservative Christian groups, and people that you might find saying things like, "I'm sorry that your husband hit you, but you're just going to have to forgive him. Divorce isn't an option." Or don't spend your money on the life-saving treatments. Give the money to the church, and you'll be blessed tenfold. And so I think that's why he's drawing that comparison, is because it's coming from the same the same audience and the same comment. The same demographic of people who would comment.
Sure.
And so
I know there are some pastors who are naive out there who have not been trained or see or respond, and I think biblically to abuse, and it's really unfortunate. It seems to be a caricature. I don't know. Maybe I know the disclosure of the Southern Baptist Convention shows that there hasn't been a response. I just don't know, like here at Victory and the pastors I know, who would ever say that to a woman.
Oh no, not here. No.
I know. But I'm just saying, so I guess the problem, I didn't know much about the Grammys. I just watched a little clip of it to get ready a couple seconds before we started here. My question with that video on the Grammys is it glamorizing Satan? Is it glamorizing the unholy relationship? Is it what art can do such a good job, better than sometimes a book or a straightforward presentation? Art of any medium of music or painting or dance or theater can show the horrors of what's wrong in the world and the destruction of our selfishness in a way that's even more powerful. But it also can twist things to glamorize something that doesn't need to be glamorized. And so I guess that was my question. Are we glamorizing Satan? Is kind of a...
I don't take it that way.
Okay.
I guess I could see how somebody might, but I think that I think that's just it's a little in my head a little too obvious for Satan, like to advance his work. Like I'm the big scary red devil with horns instead of and then that's
Right.
just so obvious and in your face. It's like over the top obvious that it's like not even being taken seriously in that regard. At least for me,
Right.
to the point where even I read that the Church of Satan was commenting like meh on the Grammy performance, like they were just like this doesn't even make sense, really. And maybe that's the trick, right? Maybe that's the trick. We're just, but for me personally, I think there are bigger fish to fry and far more covert and hidden things that need to be taken care of. To me, this does not glamorize it. Is it tasteful? I don't much care for it. I don't really like the song. I don't, whatever. But I do think that we have more.
I guess my problem is is it turning Satan into a kitty cat when he's called a ferocious lion? Like, are somebody going to watch and like, oh, this is funny. Let's laugh about Satan. Isn't that funny? Look at he's wearing horns and that that comes out of kind of medieval. The horns and all that kind of stuff comes out of medieval art. Not at all a biblical idea of real evil. I mean, talking about some of these things that TikTok dude was talking about, the real evil of abuse, like that is satanic.
Yes.
So I wouldn't want anything to minimize how much Satan wants to create chaos and destruction and evil and hardened hearts and manipulate and the real wickedness that's out there. So I don't think it's ever helpful to glamorize or minimize what evil actually does. And then even that song, like, yeah, I think Satan is behind that kind of stuff. To have a person leave their family and do something unholy, as the song says. So to make it kind of a goofy production.
I think it's so over the top. That
Yeah,
it doesn't even make sense to me. Like,
right. I want us to be able to. C.S. Lewis says at the beginning of his book Screwtape Letters, where he wrote a whole book of I think it's Wormwood writing to Screwtape, and one of the devil's underlings writing to the devil himself on how he tempts people, and at the beginning of the book he says, there's two extremes. Either you get so obsessed about the devil you almost worship him, or you don't think he exists, or you don't care, and the devil's happy with you doing either of those. And I guess I think putting him that picture, that idea out there center stage at the Grammys like that, like how are we supposed to respond to that? Like what is the art trying to get us to do? Is it supposed to get us to get angry about how the devil works and the kind of, or is it just trying to poke fun?
Yeah, or to be controversial and create a buzz, which
Yeah.
is, I would argue, not a great motive either. But I mean, it's the
It worked, I
industry.
guess. I really appreciate art that can talk about things that we can't even put into words to tell a message that's in line with the truth. Now, if he was trying to say, like, look at how the devil destroys families, let's stay away from any of that garbage, and let's show how hideous this actually is. But I don't think that's what it was. I think it was kind of like cheeky, like, why can't we dance with the devil kind of thing. I don't know. So
Divided in the podcast.
Matt, you want to be the
Come on,
tiebreaker?
tiebreaker.
I think it's a creative choice. I think it's nothing more than that.
I think so.
I agree with what you said. Like, I hope it's not trivializing something terrible, but I think it's just an artistic choice. I mean,
But what's the message? I don't understand the message. Like fire, hell.
who knows? Maybe he doesn't know. Maybe he just likes to ride the line and make the audience guess.
Or his producer or manager said, this is what we're doing now. And he said, okay.
Maybe he just wanted to make a big flash. Celebrities are not real people. They don't make real choices.
Oh my goodness.
They don't have
Well-
real consequences.
I think what humans do goes back to the very beginning. We turn evil into good and good evil. You know, so that example of saying doesn't matter if your wife or if your husband hits you, you have to go back to that. That's evil, right? To call good evil, to put the devil on center stage and not make him look or portrayed as something we should run from and fight against. For me, that's turning evil into good and almost propping up either in a trivialized way that like, oh, this isn't something we need to be scared about. It's not that big of a deal. Or look, we're trying to get on. Like, what bear was he trying to poke? Like, I don't know why he'd be surprised that some Christians are concerned that what we believe is something that's so evil is portrayed as not that big of a deal. Yeah. I don't think it does any. I don't think it helps in the public sphere to have too many Christians like try to stop this kind of stuff. But if I'm talking to my kids or my family, like that's not how the Bible portrays the devil. As somebody you could making a joke out of it. I would stay away as much as you can. You know, the same way I wouldn't want to invite any kind of demonic kind of presence into our lives and goof around with that. I mean, I think a lot of people goof around with that stuff.
Right. And I mean, I agree with you completely. The devil is not, this is awful. This is just not, I don't.
On record, you're not for the devil.
Right. Let's clear that up. Yes. But I think, I've always thought to myself, the image of the devil that we so often see with the horns and the red and whatever the fire is, if somebody walked up to you looking like that and was like, hey, come hang out with me, you'd be like, nah, man. But the devil is much more crafty than that. And so
yeah, I
feel like I am able to separate the two, and I'm more concerned about the craftier ways that
oh yeah, me too.
That he's getting, and he's very, it's very real, and I think it's not to be taken lightly. But
for me, over the years, I feel like this is my primary ministry. What he was talking about in there, like the person who is being beaten or abused or has gone through that and is dealing with the trauma, like those people have taught me so much about the gospel. They've taught me so much of resilience. They've taught me so much, like, if you don't preach the gospel correctly to them, you're going to miss the whole point of the Bible. If you let somebody who is intentionally doing evil without repentance and give them the gospel, like, you've missed the whole point of the Bible. And so not only do I feel like that's the primary person that I hope that I can help and listen to, but that's the primary person who's taught me theology, how to correctly divide law and gospel. So it breaks my heart if anybody would empower an abusive person and dismiss a victim, which it does. It happens all the time. We tend to always take the wrong side, and in lots of different places, not just in the church.
What were you gonna say something, Matt?
Oh, I was just gonna agree with what you said. I think about, I think there's a level of separation even between what we think Satan is and what he actually is, and I think if Sam Smith knew what the devil was,
yeah, right,
that's a horrifying creature out there. he's not dressing up as actual Satan. He's dressing up as kind of a cultural representation of it's I don't know, Satan's is the ultra villain, but there's lots of different portrayals of evil that have taken kind of a turn because our culture has, like, we've talked about, like, anti-heroes and everyone loves the villain, like Captain Hook and Hades, right, from what's the Hercules, yeah. And there's sort of this glamorous, like, sort of devious, and it's like, that's not real evil, right?
Yeah.
That's
not
really
real
what
evil the way
is.
that we understand it,
right?
You know.
And so it's just playing sort of like a villainous, a cartoon almost character, which is just sort of, which is almost beloved, but is not really. It's not evil.
Sure, I don't know. That's not a helpful message either.
Oh no, I wouldn't have done that. I think it's stupid.
Yeah, but I guess every movie, every song, every piece of art is telling a message. And I want to know, like, so what truth are you trying to uncover with this art? And sometimes, like, they do know, they have something, they might not tell you, they might want you to come up with it on your own. And sometimes when they say, well, there is no clear message or whatever, that's also telling a message that we live in a world that's ambiguous and there is no answer, and the kind of the postmodern message. So I just would like to know, like, what are you trying to portray? What are you trying to teach us about reality through this art?
I would argue that Sam Smith, and I don't know this, but I have a feeling, like you said, Matt, he probably does not really understand the actual threat.
Right.
I mean, I feel that I understand it, to a degree, and I would not dress up like that.
Yeah.
Because of that.
Right.
But I think if you're somebody, kind of, if we're going to Sam Smith and getting to, where he's at, I don't think he fully understands the true danger.
Yeah, and I think for me, that's scary because the devil is behind all those horrible things that we were talking about and the ongoing battles that people fight because of abuse and of evil. So,
but again, I think the reason this Episcopalian priest, put the two together is because the criticisms, or, well, I should say the response for both Sam Smith's, devil worship and the ignoring of abuse are coming from the same camp, and that's why he put those two things together.
I think there are more and more Christians who are finally waking up to, talking about this and actively, not enough, but the Me Too movement, I think, got people to say, like, we need to talk about this and we need to respond to it. It just, who's got the resources to actually call something evil, work with forgiveness? You're not going to find all those resources in secular philosophy or psychology. So I hope it breaks my heart whenever there's a cover up. It breaks my heart whenever, because there's sinful people inside and outside the church. It's just too bad that when it's a representative of the church. So, yeah. Do
you have anything further on that, Matt?
Should we go on to the next TikTok?
Yeah, I was going to say this kind of segues a little bit into another one of these. Christy.Burke. She is a content creator, very staunch deconstruction advocate. And I think we actually have reviewed one of hers before. Oh. And she is arguing that she's doing what Jesus wants, if he exists. She's doing what he wants by leaving the church because the church is full of Pharisees, and that's the group that Jesus condemned. And so therefore she feels that she is, if he exists, he's not mad at her for doing it.
Okay.
So you want to listen? Here we go.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Well, you're right about one thing. I was a part of a generation that was raised to be a Christian. I was raised in a home that taught me to love like Jesus, not judge others. What would Jesus do? And I was taught that the only people that Jesus judged and condemned were the Pharisees, the ultra-religious, the people who were using their religion as a prop to condemn others, to judge others, to feel superior to others. And so I got to a point and I'm like, who's acting like Jesus and who's acting like the Pharisees? And I looked around and I realized that everyone in the church was acting like the Pharisees, walking around praying in the streets, telling people they'd pray for them even though Jesus said not to do that, judging people, condemning people, voting against basic human rights. And I thought, those are the people that Jesus condemned. Those are the people that Jesus didn't like. And so now this church that taught me to be like Jesus, what would Jesus do? Well, I'm doing what Jesus do, and I'm turning my back on the Pharisees. So no, it wasn't hate that drove me away. It was my love, it was my empathy, and it was my realization that all of those people I left behind, that church I left behind, was full of people that Jesus wouldn't want anything to do with. And now I realize that if Jesus does exist, he's not mad at me for leaving behind the Pharisees. He's not mad at me for using the brain he gave me, using the heart he gave me, and following my intuition. If he's the creator and he's the one that put me there and he does truly love me, he's not mad at me. He's mad at them. So y'all need to refocus.
There were many things wrong with that, but
Powerful words.
Let's hear it, Matt. What do you think?
Well, I think it was like the first or second sentence. She said that the only people that Jesus condemned were the Pharisees. I don't think that's true. Because I remember him saying something like, if you're a tax collector, don't extort people. If you're a soldier, if you're a soldier, don't bully people.
Yeah.
Take your pay and be content with that. And,
John the Baptist said that, but that's definitely same message from.
oh, see, I don't know what I'm talking
That's
about.
okay. No, it's same thing. Yeah.
I thought that was Sermon on the Mount, but nope.
and are we not supposed to pray? Tell people we're going to pray for them, or
I think that's a caricature of the Sermon on the Mount where he says, don't do your acts to be seen by people, to go out if your motive, and I think the idea behind that is like, if you're trying to do it to be seen, don't do it.
I see.
But Jesus definitely prayed in public, so it's not wrong.
Right.
But why are you doing it? It's
So
all
her-
about the
her
heart.
facts are a little. She's
Yeah.
portraying it as he said not to do it, not that he said check your
Right.
motives or whatever.
I guess the question I have when it comes to deconstruction, like, all right, if you're going to knock down the foundation you are standing on, what do you build on top of that? Like, all right, if I were following you, you spent a lot of time telling me what's wrong. What do you want me to do now? So where do you want me to go? Where do I find community? What am I going to be following? What's going to be better? Because every time we try to come up with like a utopian society or, we can do all this, it's a human problem. It's not just a church problem. And if I would go to her church, is everyone really a Pharisee in that church? Is everyone really condemning? Is everyone
Probably
very...
not.
And I guess that's the question is sometimes she probably had some bad experiences, and I'm really sad about that. Whenever I teach the church to our young people or in general, I draw two circles. There is, and kind of a Venn diagram, there are people inside of the holy Christian church who believe in Jesus, who attend church, who are true Christians. And there are people outside the visible church because they got burned or something happened that are also Christians. But there are also people who are members of a visible church who are hypocrites. So that's all there. And at the end of the day, that's going to be revealed by Jesus. And he did spend a lot of time condemning the Pharisees and those religious leaders, but he also had he was also forming a church with his disciples. A gathering of people, and the early Christian church formed as a group of people. So, yeah, I think if you want to spend your time pointing out all the things that are wrong in the church or all the things that are wrong with Christianity, like you can find it.
What's the replacement?
What are you going to build that has that kind of that's going to be with Scientology? Is that where we're going? I mean,
well, I think her disgust seems to be with like other people and their right. So like Christian people.
Sure.
And I mean, I guess every one of us really is a hypocrite. Like
at some level.
At some level, right? Some are more, some are maybe worse than others. I don't know. But so I think her disgust is with other people.
Sure.
And that they saying that they, presumably she mentions basic human rights, which I would assume she's talking about maybe gay marriage and things
Sure.
like that. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that.
So go
I was
on.
gonna say Jesus. I feel like Jesus just he laid down the hard truth sometimes. Like he showed love to the outsiders for sure, but he also the woman, he said, go and sin no more to the prostitute. He said go and but and then also the guy he heals from blindness, right? He says so also should you and I'm just thinking like there or the money changers was another one. I mean, it was like some people needed a slap on the wrist, and some people needed grace, and he walked that line, and he also befriended some of the Pharisees, and he did he didn't hate all of them and condemn all of them. Yeah. We use the term like Pharisaical, like we use that as like a caricature now, but that probably doesn't mean every single one of them was the same.
No, the Pharisees started out as a good movement, actually. Like 60 years before Jesus, they were the ones who cleansed the temple, kicked out the Greeks, tried to hold strong to the faith. But with any movement, they can get more fanatical over time. And so it started out as, like, hey, let's do the right thing. Let's hold to the truth. Let's return to the temple. Let's return to God's word. And then over time, they started getting arrogant and self-righteous and self-centered, which can happen in any movement. I think the reason I think it's so valuable that we spend some time talking about this is because I think a young person, well, any age, but especially a young person, can watch that TikTok. There's no dialogue. There's no context. They can't see that that's a straw man argument that, like, I'm leaving because all the people are Pharisees and I'm not a Pharisee. Okay, so you have it all together and everybody in your church was a total Pharisee. And there's no way to ask that question. So I'm thinking about my kids probably watching stuff like that. And so I just think it's very important that on this podcast, around the kitchen table, we ask some harder questions. Like, is that really true? Is it really true that, and even that point about not judging. Well, she's judging all the people inside of the church. And Jesus didn't say, he did say, you should, do not judge. With the measure you judge, it'll be measured to you. Then he goes on to clarify. He says, well, here's what I actually mean. Before you judge, make sure you take the plank out of your own eye before you take the speck out of somebody else's eye. We need to judge. I mean, if you don't judge somebody, you're going to get stomped all over. Like Jesus said, be as wise as snakes and innocent as doves. Make sure you're wise. Like you look at people and assess who they really are. Just don't judge. He's against judgmentalism, where we look down on other people. So,
she's making a judgment call.
Right.
Her decision. She had to make a judgment on her circumstances and on people.
Yeah.
Right. Using the, if he exists, using the brain and the heart and the intuition that he gave her.
Yeah.
Because hers is better than everyone else's.
Yeah. So I think it's really too bad that she went through a bad experience, and I think we have to acknowledge that and be honest about that. And I wonder what it was. Did she have gay friend, or she had herself, or something, went through a hard time, or was there abuse and she went to her pastor and the pastor said, offhanded comment, and then that stuck with her, and then she that's what I kind of hear it happens with a lot of deconstruction. Yeah. It's just the Christian church, and even its foundation on the Hebrew scriptures. I mean, we're talking going back 5,000, 6,000 years of history of refining and learning and adapting to situations and understanding human nature over thousands of years and how to respond to it with the law and the gospel. And now I'm going to deconstruct all of that, and I'm going to come up with something better in my short lifespan. What are you going to build on? What's better? So that's always the question I have. All right, where are you going to go?
say, I think as Christians, we get real jazzed about the gospel pretty easily. And you kind of forget that for the outsider who doesn't know what the gospel is, Christianity is not about the gospel. To
Sure.
them, it's about the law. It's
Sure.
about behavior.
Yeah.
And so we obviously are hyper aware of our own behavior, but you just have to be hyper conscious also of how that is affecting other people, because
Right.
actions do speak louder than words. And then, not that you're not going to sin, but you need to know when you need to apologize or ask for forgiveness or be humble and take a step back. Because again, if you're not a Christian, the gospel doesn't exist, which means everybody is living under the law, which means everybody can and should be judged by their behavior.
All
Which
the
is a
time.
terrible way to live,
All the time. Yeah.
but there's no alternative.
I know people, kind of the big example of forgiveness and what the power of Christianity. Two big examples is Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu, their response to the apartheid and how they, Nelson Mandela being in jail, I think it was 18 years, and then responds with forgiveness, and then they were willing to stop the decades of violence with Christ's forgiveness. The other one would be Martin Luther King Jr., peaceful protesting because he believed in the gospel, he believed in forgiveness. And then you hear this, all sorts of different circumstances where there's been a murder, there's been violence, and the victims, they still demand justice and that the person can't hurt anybody anymore. They go to jail, but they don't hold the grudge of anger. They don't continue the cycle of violence. And so you're right. I mean, I think the gospel is something we don't have. We don't have gospel outside of Christianity. There's no mechanism for it. There's no. All you have is the law. All you have is justice and making sure people pay the penalty right now. And that doesn't work in our, it doesn't work in society, this never-ending cycle of violence, and it doesn't work in our own relationships. If there is no forgiveness, how do you stay married? If there is no forgiveness, how do you function in any friendship? You're constantly. I talk about this with our kids. Like, if you are a friend of somebody long enough, you're going to get in a fight. If you're married long enough or dating somebody long enough, you're going to get in a fight. And if you don't have forgiveness, you don't have the ability to say, I'm sorry and I forgive you, you're not going to be able to have any real relationships. And I think that's kind of where we're at as a society. And it's too bad. If you kick Christianity out, you don't have that mechanism for forgiveness. There's no cross.
Yeah, I think, going back to people just being, disgusted with or using, the behavior of Christians to deconstruct their own faith and whatnot. I think that, I lost my train of thought. Somebody else talk.
One thing that we talked about a little bit on the podcast before is, who of us, inside or outside the church, is pulling it off? Like, all right, so again, are we supposed to follow you? Like, do you have it all put together? Is there anything about your life that you don't want everyone to follow? Is there anything about your life that's hypocritical? Is there anything about your life that needs forgiveness? And that's the part is, when somebody leaves a church and says they're going to start their own church, do you think you really have figured it out? Like, you're the one that has all the righteousness and doesn't need the forgiveness? So I don't know. Did you get your straight thought?
Kind of. I think, well, that's why I think it's really important that, we continue to try to break these stereotypes that people have, such as, some of these other TikToks, and I don't know if we'll really have time to get to them or not, but some of these other TikToks, one gal says, she cites thought-terminating cliche, the use of thought-terminating cliches. So when somebody who is giving a counterpoint to Christianity, or they've got questions, tough questions, they're met with and even interrupted with things like, well, God works in mysterious ways. We got to have faith. This is God's plan, which, man can't understand. And so so that's one kind of behavior that I think, people who are deconstructing their own faith, they see that behavior and they use that and they say, well, I'm not allowed to ask questions. Am I not allowed to struggle? Nope. You just got to have faith. You got to have faith. And then just some other like Christian isms, like, well, I love them, but not their sin. And it seems like people, and it's kind of a juxtaposition because like, people don't want to hear that they're wrong or that it's sinful. But just because they don't want to hear it doesn't mean we shouldn't say it. And then, but also like, do we need to say it? Does that make sense? What I just asked?
Yeah. I think the Apostle Paul, I think it's in 1 Corinthians 5 where he says, who am I to judge the world? Judge people inside of the church. If we all agree we're Christians, we agree with God's word, and we want to be held accountable to that, and that includes being forgiven. But if I would start acting out of line of what I say I believe, I would hope you guys would say, "Hey, stop it! You say you're a Christian, but you're not living like one." Now, somebody who's outside the Christian faith, they don't have that commitment. They're not saying I believe this, and they're not living under that desire to honor God or to follow Him or to be in line, be a follower of Jesus, follow what He says and does. And so I don't have any reason to hold them to that standard. I mean, I could maybe address their conscience. I could talk about them breaking the law of the state. They're still under government laws, but they're not under Christ law in that same sense.
So we really, I mean, in essence, as Christians, we really don't need to make remarks about people's, same-sex marriage.
No, but I do
to
think
them and say like, well, you're not working under God's design.
Correct. I don't know. That's probably not helpful to start there.
Well, I don't think we should.
Right. It doesn't help, and they're not. That's not where you start. The question, with any of these foundational things with the family or human life or whatever, applying to a conscience, like, is this good for society as a whole? Like, is this the best way for society to thrive, yeah, and flourish and appeal to history and appeal to conscience? And if you're going to talk about like governmental policy, things like that, like you're not going to bring in the Christian faith and say, this is why we need this law, or this is because of what the Bible says, because they're not living under that law or underneath that truth. But yeah, as Christians, we do want to, not hypocritically, but we want to live lives that are in line with what we say. And when we fall out of line, there is forgiveness and there is repentance. But yeah, it's a waste of time to try to make somebody, we have different laws here in our country than other countries. And to go over to another country and tell them to abide by our speed limit laws, like to go tell the Brits to drive on the right side of the road, would not make sense because they're not part of they're not citizens here. And I think that's kind of what we're saying about Christianity. Like, you're not in the sense how Paul talks, citizen of heaven. You're not you don't identify as a child of God, a Christian. And so why would we ask you to live underneath the kingdom of Jesus?
Well, and I get the impression that this Christie person, in her talk about the Pharisees at her church, might have been making comments, things to me. That's the sense that I get where she may have experienced these Pharisees in her church, going out and telling, same-sex couples like, this isn't God's design. Yeah. And that's, in her mind, that was her, that was not what Jesus, what Jesus would have done per se.
Sure. And
so she walked away from it. So, I mean, I don't know what her specific experience was.
We don't have Jesus interacting a ton with people outside of the Jewish kind of faith, so he could hold them to account to the Jewish scriptures. But we do have like Paul, and when Paul is talking to Greeks, he's appealing to nature. He's appealing to their conscience. He isn't necessarily appealing to God's word to begin. And I think that's the law is written on our hearts. And so I think if you're trying to make an argument or a case, if you see somebody going in a bad way, that's where you would appeal. Like, is this really making sense to your own heart? Is this really causing your life to flourish? that's maybe how you would talk instead of this is what the Bible says. Yeah.
Matt, do you have anything to say?
Matt, are you going to watch? Who's going to win the Super Bowl? That's my question.
Probably Team A.
The green team.
Probably the green one. I have no idea who's playing.
Yeah. Well, that was a pretty heavy conversation. I thought I would lighten up a little bit.
That's good.
Yeah.
Who are you rooting for?
I think Kansas City.
Kansas City. That's what I was.
They win all the time, but listen, I love Travis Kelce. Okay, he's the tight end for the Chiefs. So
yeah, I knew that one. Yep.
No, you didn't.
So, are you rooting for the Eagles or are you rooting for Kansas City?
I'm kind of tired of Kansas City always doing well.
Okay.
Like, it'd just be nice to see
underdog.
something else. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I've heard people say they can't stomach the Eagles because of their fans. So that's why they're rooting for Kansas City.
Oh.
Do you think you should judge a team by their fans? There's a question for
sometimes, yeah.
you. Okay.
Yeah. I've heard Green Bay fans are kind of
They're goofy, right?
yeah.
Wearing cheese on their heads.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's all I have to say about that.
If you'd like to get a hold of us here at the Climbing Sycamores podcast, feel free to email bsadler@victoryofthelamb.com. bsadler@victoryofthelamb.com. If you like today's intro music, it's been brought to you by Andrew Lynch's song, My Name, Hello.